almost there. Kentucky Derby 141, the 2015 edition. Andy Serling, Mike Beer from Timeform US. A lot of talk about this Derby. We're almost there.
Yeah, it's right upon us now. This one, I feel like this is the first one in a while. This might live up to all the hype.
No, I agree. This is a very exciting Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
The winner of this race is going to have to be a good horse.
Yeah.
And we've seen a terrific amount of preps. And one of the things that's been best about this Derby chase is a lot of horses have not fallen by the wayside. Yeah, we lost Texas Red. Yeah, we lost Calculator. It happened relatively early in the season. All of the big guns are showing up. And I guess at this point, no gun is bigger than American Pharoah. And American Pharoah is the horse we have to talk about because he's a horse that both you and I, Mike, are trying to beat.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to try and beat him in this race. Obviously, when you're looking at his prep races this year, there've only been two of them. They're sort of carbon copies of each other, where he just was in against horses he was way better than, and he just galloped both times. I know he was visually impressive, Andy. Two really, really visually impressive races, but man, don't you want to see this horse take on a challenge at some point?
You know, I can see when you look at him cruising away from those horses why a lot of people are going, oh my gosh,
I've never
he's
seen anything
just
like
so
it.
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I actually may have seen him sprout wings at some point during that race. Yeah, this is a horse that when you look at the PPs, you say to yourself, okay, he's a good horse, but I'm seeing a lot of good horses in this race, and I'm trying to figure out why everybody's talking about him as though it's a fait accompli, he's going to win this race. And for me, it's a lot of talk about what he does in the morning and what people believe he can do.
Yes.
But I think you and I are people that look at PPs, and we base our opinions on what we've seen on the racetrack. And what we've seen on the racetrack is a horse who's a serious contender and probably a 5-to-1 shot in a field where maybe there's a few horses around the 5-to-1 price, not a 2-to-1 shot. So he's the very definition of bad value.
Right.
And what could be worse than bad value in a 20-horse field?
Yeah, there can't be anything worse than bad value in the Kentucky Derby, especially. And listen, he's clearly a good horse. We gave him a 111 for that race that we just watched there on the Arkansas Derby, but he's a horse who he's run in the weakest prep races so far. He's had perfect trips both times. I mean, that race right there, as good as he looked through the stretch, I mean, talk about a perfect trip, tracking one of the fastest paces at any of the prep races with Bridget's Big Lovey cutting the pace. I mean, you're supposed to win easy in that situation.
He's had everything go in his favor, and he has not had a difficult prep. And, you know, I remember when UNLV or even a Kentucky this year, when these big behemoths have lost, it's been because they've gotten into situations that they hadn't really faced before. And the question with American Pharoah is he going to deal with the speed early in this race? And we're going to talk about the pace when we look at your pace projector a little bit later. Is he going to deal with that pace, and then is he going to be able to hold off the closers? It ain't going to be like it was at Arkansas. Maybe he's just so great and everything they say about him is true, but I'm willing to bet against him at 2-to-1 to find out.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to bet against him at a price like that as well. And listen, in a lot of ways, you know, I'm sort of hoping that he shows up and he really runs this spectacular race in the Derby, and it feels like we have a real superstar on our hands, but I'm betting against that happening.
I'm not hoping for any of that, but to each their own.
Yeah.
He's got a stablemate, and his stablemate, he's 5-2 in the morning line, American Pharoah, and his stablemate Dortmund is 3-1 in the morning line. I think Dortmund's price is going to rise precipitously because a lot of people are going to say, well, if Bob Baffert thinks American Pharoah's the better horse, why would I bet Dortmund? I think those people are making a mistake.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this, Dortmund, to me, I think he's a really, really good horse. And here's, one of his, very big races. 6-for-6 lifetime now. He's fast. He's undefeated. He's a dual Grade 1 winner coming into the Derby. I just don't see any real chinks in this horse's armor. I mean, he has been a good horse from day one, and he was a good horse right through the prep season.
I can't argue with any of that. I think every time he runs, I've been more and more impressed. I actually end up picking against him in this race, though I have great respect for him, and I think he's going to turn out to be an excellent horse. We'll talk about why we made our picks later, but I agree with you. But my question to you, because I know that you're particularly interested in at least one horse behind him in this race, what do you think of the runner-up in this race, or the runners-up?
Of the runners-up in
the San Diego Derby we just took a look at.
The horse that I was most interested in, I don't know that was the strongest field that Dortmund has faced out there. That was the one race, though, where he just got complete control of the early lead that day, Dortmund did. I just thought he had all the best of it that day. And one of the horses in particular behind him was Bolo. I thought Bolo, of all the horses that Dortmund has beaten so far, he had the toughest trip in that race. I felt like he had he was in a really tough situation throughout the running of that race, and I actually thought he ran pretty well.
Chasing wide in there, and you think maybe the Derby's better for him.
He was sort of last on the outside the entire way as Dortmund controlled things up on the front, and he just had no choice at the far turn to just try and take a wide run into that race, and that was never going to work out.
He definitely appears to me, and I know you agree, to be at very least an interesting long shot in this Kentucky Derby. And now we've got Materiality and Upstart, what may have been the most exciting stretch battle of the entire Triple Crown chase when they hooked up in the Florida Derby. Now, Materiality is trying to break that jinx, as it's been since Apollo, that to win the race as a horse that never ran as a 2-year-old. He's run extremely well and better in each of his starts, whereas Upstart has also run well in all of his starts in Florida, finishing first twice, getting disqualified once, and then finishing second to Materiality. I am more interested in Upstart than Materiality, but let's talk about Materiality. I feel as though he's had very favorable setups in his races. He did not draw well with post 3, and while I think he's a significant talent, very likely, like a Dortmund, could turn out to be an exceptional horse as we progress through the year, I don't think I want him in this race.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And, even as I say that, I know that, he's somewhere, 10 or 12 to 1 on the morning line. If he's any kind of, sort of bigger price and you really like him, fine, because I do feel like he is going to turn out to be a really good horse. He did not draw well, and it feels like there are other things working against him here as well.
I agree, though, as you're right, though. In the 12 to 1 range, I would never fault anybody for playing him. Now, my feeling on Upstart, who I'm a big fan of, is first of all, he's never run a bad race, and arguably every race he runs, and this is very apparent in the Timeform US figures, you guys have him getting better with each and every start. And what I like about him is that he's really a horse that does his best running, or has in the past, when he's able to make one big run. And I think being wide and too close to the pace is what cost him potentially winning, but absolutely second in last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But down in Florida, where I believe rightfully so, Rick Violet, the trainer, worry that it's a track that's conducive to speed types, and his main competitions in those races were speed types, he put him much closer to the pace, and he's such a good horse that he's still able to run very well while running against his best nature. In the Kentucky Derby, they can just drop him out, hope there's going to be a quick pace, which there rates to be, and make one run. And I think that will work to his truest and best nature and maybe produce a victory.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Andy. And I think that was never more true than it was in that Florida Derby stretch run where we just looked at, because that was a race that really felt like, even on paper, it was a 2-horse race. Him and Materiality, who felt like the up-and-comer. And Materiality set off right for the lead from the gate. Upstart had no choice. He had to go with him in there, and he had to race him up on the pace. I think you're right. They take him back in this race and let him make one run. He's a much more dangerous horse.
I'm hoping that's the case. Now, a horse that's gotten a lot of talk that I know I don't get, and I have a feeling you don't really get, is the 2 Carpediem, who has done no favors by his draw on the 2 post. Here he is dominating lesser foes in the Bluegrass Stakes. Listen, as they like to say, he's done little wrong, but what has he done that's so right in this year's Derby, Mike?
Yeah, it's just one of those situations where he's not, listen, you can't knock anything that he's done on the track so far, I guess. He's made 2 preps so far. He's won them both very easily, but they weren't the strongest preps in the world. He had horses, behind him that just were never going to be able to beat him. He's not particularly fast right now. And he's drawn a terrible post towards the inside.
Yeah, I mean, I give Todd Pletcher an enormous amount of credit, because he has managed to find the weakest 2 Grade 1s that have been run in a time period when there have been very tough races to get 2 Grade 1s for this horse. And I think that's his job. But in doing so, he hasn't got him into a race where he's had to really work that hard. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, we haven't seen his best yet. I don't think we've seen the best of almost all of these, if any of these horses at this point. It's early in their 3-year-old year. This is the wrong year to be too slow.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is the wrong year to be just. There are too many other horses here who are already proven to be faster than he is. So maybe he does have room to improve. I'm sure that he does. He's going to have to show it on Saturday.
He absolutely is, and he's not done any favors by his inside draw.
And it's not like he's going to be a great price in this race.
He's not. If he ends up the 3rd choice, he seems to me, he might be more overbet as the 3rd choice than American Pharoah at the ridiculous 2 to 1. He may end up in this race. The Wood Memorial was a good race this year, and a horse, Frosted, who impressed a lot of us with a wide trip against the grain of the track in the Remsen last year, and things didn't go well in Florida for him. I think it had more to do with him running off in a fast pace in the Fountain of Youth. They got him to rate in this race after he had a throat procedure done, and rate he did, and he was able to rate in a slow pace. He gets a faster pace in the Derby. His final kick might be even stronger.
Yeah, and we'll see. This horse, he does sort of feel like, too, a horse who's improving maybe at the right time. This was the best race that he's ever run. The pace wasn't that fast, as you pointed out. They rode him very confidently and kept him wide throughout. I don't love the horse that he was running down in the stretch there. good New York bred and contender. He's facing much better horses in the Derby, obviously, but it just feels like everything is there for this horse. He's been a good horse in another one. He's been a good horse right from the start, and I feel like he's peaking at the right time, maybe.
I agree, and I think he's a little bit of a forgotten horse. His trainer, Kieran McLaughlin, all of his horses have been running extremely well lately.
Great.
I think Contender is a horse. I'm not using my top four, but you're playing supers. He could be fourth in this race. What about El Kabir, who finished third? One argument is he's always been a little slow, and he got exposed in this race, even though he had a very successful winter here. The other argument is, like a Monarcos, who finished a distant second to Congaree before he won the Derby, he got the prep he needed, and now he can take a step forward.
It did sort of look like, when you watch that Wood Memorial back, especially, like they were maybe riding him as sort of as a prep for the Derby, because they never really asked him for too much. He wound up somehow being last on the far turn. It didn't seem like CC Lopez was that interested in motivating this horse to get into the race at any point, and they just let him finish up through the stretch. I thought in a lot of ways it could be a perfect prep, but maybe for a different horse, because so far, as good a year as he's had, as good a career as he's had so far, he's just not fast enough to win this race, I don't think.
It feels like in this year's Derby, if you're playing supers, and there are no dime supers, so you got to be willing to invest a lot of money, you're using horses, if you like a horse like El Kabir or whatever long shots, you're trying to get him into the third or maybe fourth slot, because the top is very, very heavy, and a tough year to fit anybody in there. And I think that's important to discuss, because there's another horse we haven't even gotten to that's towards the top, and that's Firing Line. And Firing Line fought it out with Dortmund back at Santa Anita in one of the most thrilling races, if not the most thrilling race on this entire prep schedule. And he went away to Sunland Park, and suddenly he was a monster when he wasn't facing horses like Dortmund. And I think this accentuates just how strong the top horses in this race are.
Yeah, I agree. And this might actually turn out to be a good thing for them to get this horse out of Santa Anita to run a race like Sunland Park. I know he was in against horses he just towered over, but it's nice to let a horse get out there and win a race like that after he took two brutal defeats, missing by 2 heads to Dortmund twice. I mean, if you like Dortmund in this race and he's going to be 7-2, 3-1, 4-1 around there, I think you have to like Firing Line.
I agree. Why is he supposed to be 15-1 or 12-1 or 18-1? Who knows what price they're going to end up as the money just keeps flooding into American Pharoah. And I think Firing Line has every reason to win this race. I know the race was 6 weeks ago. All of these rules to the Derby are flying out the window, one after the other. I don't worry much about the time. I think you've got a talented horse and a horse capable of winning this year's Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, I think he's a major, major player in this race, and perhaps one at a very good price as well. And you're right, those rules, I mean, there are no rules for any other races. I'm not buying any rules for this one.
And I want to remind people you are watching on NYRA.com, and NYRA.com is the one-stop shopping place for watching our races. You're watching the video. You can watch our races live. You can also bet on NYRA.com. Join up on NYRA Rewards and bet through NYRA.com. And also, Timeform US is quite a package they're offering for this year's Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, that's available at NYRA.com right now as well. NYRA.com/TimeformUS. And you'll get the Kentucky Derby weekend package, which includes unlimited past performances, speed figures, pace projectors for all races Friday and Saturday. There's plenty of analysis there as well. All 13 undercard races. We've gone in depth with all of our handicappers there to give you to evaluate all those races that we're discussing here today, and the Kentucky Derby especially. And it's just one click away. NYRA.com/TimeformUS.
And we'll be talking about that pace projector when we get through some of these videos and some of these races. And I think it's a very good way to start your discussion of the race. There's so much to look at in this year's Derby. Now, International Star, he wasn't an international star, but he was a star down in New Orleans this winter. And he's a rail runner, and he can run through traffic, and he's got a lot of the attributes you like for the Kentucky Derby. The only thing he doesn't have is enough ability to win the race.
Yeah, he's just not fast enough, and it's unfortunate. Maybe in another year, he's the kind of horse I might have been willing to take a shot with on top of this race. I like this horse. All the things that you said about him are true, where they can keep him inside. He is unfazed by traffic. He makes a run every time. He's dead game through the stretches he was there and winning that race. He just doesn't have that fast race on his card.
I know. I wish he did, because he's a neat horse. He's one of the 3 New York breds in the race, and he has a chance to get a piece in the air.
I think he does.
He'll obviously get a lot of attention, being it's Ken and Sarah Ramsey own him. I just don't think he's good enough. Now, Stanford behind him got a very easy trip on the front. I don't even know if he's going to be more than a pace factor at very best in here. What about Keen Ice, who finished 3rd for Dale Romans? Dale Romans has a way of sneaking in goofy horse in the Derby. He may be one of my goofy horse to get somewhere into the Super.
Yeah, it feels like you always want to try and find at least one goofy horse to just clunk up at the bottom of the exotics and sort of fill it out at a big price. Maybe he's the horse. I got to be honest with you, I don't really like anything that I've seen from him, but you have a different opinion.
He is very slow, but, you know, my friend Doug Salvatore, I respect a lot, thinks he's an interesting Club Cup horse, and for that reason, I'm going to value his opinion and throw him in there somewhere. One horse I have absolutely no interest in whatsoever, but I think he adds some intrigue to this race is Mumtahij, who comes in from a race in Dubai, and, you know, doing the Dubai World Cup card, and we covered this on Fox, the whole world was talking after this race like it was just the flavor of the month, and this was a visually impressive win over a group of slow horses in a time not fast enough to win this race. And is he going to come from Dubai just 5 weeks ago and win this year's Kentucky Derby, even for a trainer as great as Michael DeCock?
Yeah, it's a pretty tall order for this horse to come in and win a race like the Kentucky Derby, and I get all the respect for Mike DeCock. He's a great trainer. I don't think they would just be showing up here if they thought they had no chance. But, you know, we'll just see what happens. He's not very fast right now. His dirt races are all good. I was bothered by the fact that being 4 for 5 on dirt, the one race that he lost over there in Dubai is a race that he lost without excuse. I know the horse that beat him. He came back and he trounced him in that race we just looked at, but I don't like the race that he lost. He has won twice at a mile and 3/16, so I think that's a little bit of a feather in his cap.
He definitely is not going to have a problem with the distance, but as Wayne Lucas likes to say, they can all get the distance. It's just how quickly they can get it. And, you know, if Mubtahij was 35 to 1 in this race, I wouldn't have a problem with somebody taking a shot with him. But once again, he's one of those horses that's got a little bit of hype going in, and I don't think you're getting 12 to 1, but I don't think you're getting 20 to 1 on him, and I just don't think. And the truth is, it's not value at 15 to 1. This is a 20-horse field and a 20-horse field of powerhouse horses. 15 to 1 is a special price on a lot of horses.
Yeah, he's just another horse who is a good horse who has, you know, managed to find a pretty tough Derby field, it feels like. At the bigger the price, I guess the more you kind of like him, but he doesn't feel like there's much of a chance of him being a very big price in this race.
Now, he will get some pace to run into if you look at the Timeform US pace projector, and I really want to talk about this for quite a while as we leave it up. And this is a projection based on their past races on how Timeform sees the pace developing. And looking at this pace projector put a thought in my mind, Mike, that I hadn't thought of, because they have Dortmund in front. And I think in some ways, though a lot of people expect him to rate an American Pharoah more pace, I disagree. And I think this pace projector opened my eyes up to that because of Dortmund's size. I think their one concern with him is that he won't be as tractable and maneuverable around horses. And so they will use his speed. And since apparently the feeling is that American Pharoah can do anything, they're going to rate him a little bit more in this race. And that is going to put Dortmund in the lead. And that's why I ended up taking Dortmund out of my superfecta, because I think he's going to be a casualty of what's going to be a pace involving talented horses with speed that are hitting each other at various points in this race.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be an easy race to win. I think that's a very good point. I also agree with your take on the American Pharoah thing. I don't think there's any chance you're going to see him up there, you know, right up on the lead at any point in the early stages.
Barbaro or something, sitting 4th or 5th.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dortmund, listen, on a pace projector, he is clearly fast enough to make the lead in this race, and maybe they will. Maybe they'll descend. I think that's a valid point you made as well. It seems like that's the one thing people seem to be focusing on with him, is that he's just this towering, massive horse, and he may not be a horse who's that suited to being trapped in behind horses, then being able to extricate himself and accelerate again. Maybe he can do it, and maybe he can't. I don't think that's one of those things where I don't think it's known that he can't do that, and so I don't want to try and factor it into my handicapping in any way. If they send him to the lead, it may very well work against him. But on the other hand, I just sort of feel like if he goes, he has a real chance to make things very hard on some of these horses on the front end of this race.
I agree, because I don't see Dortmund folding his 10.
I don't think
3/8 pole. I don't care how fast he's going. I don't know that he's a Bodemeister, but I think that he can hold on well enough, and that's going to hurt horses that are the speed types, even an American Pharoah moving to him, because a horse like American Pharoah's got to move to him, put him away with other various challengers in there, and then hold off horses that are coming from behind. And that's not an easy thing to do, and something I want a short price in this year's Derby to prove it. So the question becomes, where is our money going in this race? And we'll start out and we'll talk about Mike's selections.
Yeah, my top 4 picks for this race, I put Bolo on top because I know he's going to be a big price in this race. He's just a horse that I'm very interested in. I have him over Dortmund. I put Frosted in there because I think he's on the upside. And I put Firing Line in there because, as we talked about, he just feels like he could be real value in this race.
Listen, I thought about Bolo a lot. I left him out of there. He'll be in my play, and out of respect for you, I'll certainly be using him a little bit. But as I said before, I like Upstart. I have seen nothing to dissuade me from liking Upstart during this Triple Crown chase. In fact, I've seen a lot of things to like more and more about him. I don't mind his posts. They'll drop him out of the race. It's not going to matter. I like him on top. I like Frosted. As I said, I'm throwing in Keen Ice. I give a little bit of a push to my man Doug Salvatore, who's got a good long shot opinion in this Derby, and I left Firing Line in as well. I think I'm as excited about this Derby as I have been in a long time. There are going to be some very good horses that are going to go on and do some good things. They're going to finish absolutely nowhere in here. That's the kind of race it is.
Yeah, it really is. And it feels like, for the first time in a while, all the really good top 3-year-olds, they made it all the way here. They're all in good form, and they all got here, and they're all going to line up on Saturday. I think we have a real horse race on our hands.
And we don't have any threat of bad weather, so we'll get a truly run race. That does it for Mike and I for this 141st Kentucky Derby. The best of luck to everybody.